Hello, thanks so much for joining in. It is Monday. It's time for a Learn with Lo series. I hope everybody had a wonderful Thanksgiving weekend and you're back and ready for action. Hopefully you're taking a little bit of a lunch break with me today to really dive in as we continue to build on all of the awesome education that we've been throwing at you guys this start of the series. I think this is week 5 or 6 of doing this and I have been loving it. So hopefully you guys have gotten a lot from these too. Again, I'm going to continue to build and build, just offering you guys a little bit more behind the scenes look at what are some of the different things that I use clinically in practice. What are the types of people that I work with, and what are the different symptoms, diagnoses that I'm helping people really work through using a nutrition and lifestyle intervention. So this is where we've gotten to set the stage of this root cause medicine to really shine, kind of these hidden worlds between people feeling kind of failed by the traditional medicine approach sometimes, but also not getting answers from more of a functional medicine approach, and everybody just kind of feeling floundering and lost somewhere in the middle, especially when we try to layer in confusing things like diet culture influences and different things that family and friends are trying and different detoxes and supplements that, let's be honest, all of it just ends up being a real big time, effort, and money waste if we're not doing it with the overall health or metabolic picture in mind. So, big advocate of helping you guys learn how to work with your body and not against it, which is why we're taking this kind of week by week. And I started by setting the stage for kind of really what got me into this field to begin with and where my personal and professional passions have really led me down. And then we really got into identifying some day one type information of this hormone hierarchy. And this hormone hierarchy is a picture that I really want to keep pounding home for you guys because it is that baseline graphic that I use with individuals to help them identify where are the root causes of a lot of their symptoms or diagnoses tracing back to. And to me, this is just an invaluable thing that you can offer, is helping people understand how are things connected, where are the root causes kind of sharing different interests or treatment strategies, because then it just becomes less overwhelming when we can kind of boil it all down, start from the fundamental stuff, and really see how much fixes itself in the process. I'll kind of reference this conversation a couple different times today because it was really relevant, but and I want to eventually do a social media post about it, but phrase, you know how some people just like, they say things and it sticks with you, and this was one of those phrases that really stuck with me, and it was an awesome opportunity that we had to meet with a young gal this week, and she had been through the rigmarole of traditional medicine. She had a laundry list of different diagnoses and labels that have been slapped on her, and we got an opportunity to sit down with her with some comprehensive labs, some things that she's like, I've never had that drawn before. And I was like, you've been through the rigmarole of different specialists and you've never seen a fasting insulin number drawn, like just different things like that. And we got to really show her and take her back to this hormone hierarchy, and what came out of her mouth is she said, I never knew this was all connected. And that just like stopped me in my tracks. It gave me goosebumps because I was like, oh my goodness, this is insane how somebody can go through all of these different specialists and practitioners and not realize that like it's all connected, and nobody had helped her really start from a fundamental base and work her way up. And now she doesn't even know, like I said, which labels are really true and what is really just kind of a label or a diagnosis slapped on something that they didn't really know what to tell her, right? So long story short, we'll reference that conversation a little bit later, but I really wanted to add on to where we've been so far, which is this conversation around this hormone hierarchy, right? So if you've been joining with us, the hormone hierarchy is referencing this 3-layered pyramid that we utilize to really help understand root cause medicine and help people understand the proper treatment strategies in an order of operations approach. So the foundation of our hormone hierarchy falls under this umbrella term term that we call stress management. Now, nobody likes to hear the term stress management because it seems like unrealistic. Like, oh, okay, so you're telling me the only way to look and feel my best is to eliminate all my stressors in life. No, that's not what I'm saying. I want to help people understand what all falls under this concept of adrenal health. Our adrenals are those glands that sit on top of our kidneys that are responsible for dictating and recognizing anything and everything that the body deems as stress. All of the different hormones that are involved here are going to be things that regulate our blood sugar, like insulin, cortisol, and how those types of hormones have a lot of downstream effects to the rest of the hormone hierarchy if we don't tackle and take care of that first. So the foundational layer of our hormone hierarchy goes back to adrenal health. If we don't have a great handle on adrenal health, you're going to feel some of the downstream effects getting into the second layer of that hormone hierarchy, which is our gut and liver detox pathways, which is where our thyroid also intermix there too. And then the top layer of our overall hormone hierarchy goes into our sex hormones, things like testosterone, progesterone, estrogen, FSH, LH, all of that fancy stuff. So we're going to keep working our way through this hormone hierarchy. We're definitely going to start getting into some gut conversations, especially with winter and immune health being popular. Also, I've been seeing more and more individuals coming in with autoimmune conditions. And so that definitely plays into that intermediary layer where we start to talk about gut health and liver detox and things like that as well. And we're going to get into sex hormone conversations, but we have to lay the foundational stage because this is exact, like I said, order of operations that I take all of my one-on-one clients through as well, so that we can really understand how much of those subsequent layers are really originating from a really shaky foundation to our overall hormone hierarchy. So I want you guys to have a solid foundation of your hormone hierarchy, not shaky. So we have to go back to understanding what are all of those things that our adrenals are responsible for, and what are some controllable stressors that maybe I haven't even identified as a stress because I'm not perceiving it, but my body is definitely perceiving it. It's more of an internal stressor. And a lot of the internal stressors revolve around diet and lifestyle choices, whether that's exercising, what we're eating, when we're eating, how we're eating, what we're not eating enough of, things like our circadian rhythm, our sleep, our light and blue light exposure. All of those fun things are really going to be able to talk about this rock solid foundation of our hormone hierarchy first. Obviously, we're going to dive into a really big hot topic of that, which is a lot of the diet strategies, which is where last week we got to really outline this concept of de-stressing your diet. What does it look like to eat in a way that doesn't promote stress to our body? And what are some of those things that maybe, again, you're not necessarily thinking about or perceiving as stress, but our adrenals are definitely perceiving as stress? So last week we talked about how diet culture, if you follow fad diets and you're following the next latest trend, most of them in my experience are leaving people with worse hormone health than they are promoting hormone health. And they're really just getting people into some really deep micronutrient deficiencies, macronutrient deficiencies, individuals that are, like I said, over consuming alcohol and caffeine as a result of their poor energy levels on these diets. Not to mention this hyper control of calorie intake, which doesn't even matter. So let's, like I said, kind of really build on that conversation of de-stressing your diet and understand that de-stressing your diet and all of those things that diet culture tries to promote to us fall under this big jurisdiction umbrella called blood sugar imbalance. So if you've been following along with a lot of my stories, I got a chance to kind of set the tone for this conversation yesterday on Instagram, where I definitely have my fair share of individuals that come in, and the second that I start talking about blood sugar balance, they are like, that's not me. I don't have diabetes in my family. I don't have any diabetes personally. I've never been told my blood sugar is off. My blood sugar always comes back normal on labs. So they just kind of fluff off or discount this conversation of blood sugar balance. So that's where I really want you guys to understand that blood sugar balance isn't just this black and white spectrum. It's not like one day you have healthy glucose levels and then the next day you're pre-diabetic or diabetic. It doesn't work that way. And honestly, none of health works that way. Even our thyroid markers, our blood sugar markers, our sex hormone markers, stress markers, like all of those things, they exist on a spectrum, right? Where our body for a very, very, very long time will fight for adaptation, right? It will fight to try to adapt our diet and our lifestyle, even though it doesn't really like what we're doing. It's like, it's going to panic and it's going to adapt until it just straight up cannot adapt or compensate for our daily nutrition or lifestyle choices anymore. And that's then where disease states start to really become apparent on lab work. So when I talk about blood sugar imbalance, I'm talking about a spectrum. Blood sugar imbalances exist on a spectrum all the way from one end of the spectrum where someone has optimal functioning, healthy blood sugar balance, all the way to the other end, extreme end of the spectrum where someone has full-blown type 2 or even type 1 diabetes, which is more in the autoimmune realm. So we'll kind of leave that one for an additional conversation another time. So when I talk about diabetes today, just know that I'm referring more to a type 2 diabetes state that's a slow onset versus more of the autoimmune type of a type 1. We'll leave that for a different conversation because it's kind of a totally different beast. So we'll just leave that one alone. But when we talk about blood sugar imbalance, I want you guys to start to think about what is blood sugar as it stands today, right? We kind of always hear about high blood sugar. The second that we think blood sugar, we think diabetes, right? And that means like, oh, my blood sugars run high. I need things like metformin. Need things like insulin to help control my blood sugars. I have to watch my carbs and watch my diet strategy. Absolutely, that is going to be one conversation. But when I think early signs of blood sugar imbalances, it's not just the blood sugar highs, but it's also blood sugar lows. There's two different kind of diagnosable terms that you'll hear me use, which is hyperglycemia, which is when someone comes in with high blood sugars. That's a hormone called insulin. Insulin is going to be the hormone that helps us take care of high blood sugars. Insulin's job is to take the glucose or the sugar in the bloodstream and find somewhere to put it, because glucose is very sticky, right? It's sugar, so it sticks to our red blood cells and it causes things like glycation, and glycation is what's really implicated in chronic disease risk like cardiovascular disease, atherosclerosis, Alzheimer's, dementia, diabetes, you name it, right? So our body knows I don't want a ton of sticky sugar in the bloodstream because it's going to gunk things up. So insulin's job is to find somewhere for the sugar to go. If our body cannot use it or burn it at that particular moment in time, our body is very, very efficient, and insulin sends that glucose to the liver. The liver packages it up as a fat molecule called a triglyceride, and then our body finds somewhere on our body frame to store it as fat. Cool. So that's why we call insulin our fat storage hormone. Right? So obviously, if we have body composition or health related goals, we don't necessarily want to be spilling a ton of insulin on a regular basis, right? So that's hyperglycemia. On the opposite end of the spectrum, we have hypoglycemia, blood sugar that gets too low. In this situation, our body senses stress. Blood sugar is a really key source of energy for my body. If there is not enough energy to go around, our body's like, 5-alarm fire, you need to find energy now where energy isn't coming in. So go ahead and make that happen. Zing, that's where we start to call upon this hormone called cortisol. You guys have probably heard of cortisol before, cortisol being one of our stress hormones. It is also a very catabolic hormone, meaning its job is to travel around in the bloodstream and break down tissues for immediate energy use. Now, cortisol, I always say, kind of does this. It will save you from low blood sugars multiple times a day, every day if it needs to, but it kind of takes out an IOU. It will come at a cost, right? So cortisol tends to go after kind of two main tissues in our body because they're really dense sources of amino acids. Our body goes after muscle tissue. For cortisol purposes, we'll go after muscle tissue, and it will go after the inner lining of your gut. Hence why a lot of times stress can cause gastrointestinal type symptoms. So There's a quick correlation or a clinical pearl for you guys to start to think about there. We have two different ends of this blood sugar spectrum. We have highs, which our body takes care of with insulin, being our fat storage hormone. And then we have lows, hypoglycemia, which our body takes care of with cortisol, which is our muscle wasting hormone, okay? Neither of those extremes is gonna be really great for long-term metabolic health. If we're constantly multiple times a day telling our body to store fat, then that's what our body's going to do. If multiple times a day we're getting into blood sugar zones where we're telling our body to burn muscle, also not great, right? We can't expect to have great body composition and to feel our leanest and our toned and our strongest, most energetic self if we're constantly either storing fat, burning muscle, storing fat, burning muscle. So there's what I call this Goldilocks zone, right? There's this green zone where our body really wants to hover from a blood sugar balance perspective. And that's what we actually measure when we're measuring someone's fasting glucose level, is we're kind of measuring where are you at in this, how hard is your body working to keep you in this Goldilocks zone. So just know that when I talk about blood sugar balance, I'm not just talking about blood sugar highs. I see plenty of people that come in here with blood sugar imbalance issues that are dealing with blood sugar lows. We cannot leave that out of this side of the conversation because that is usually the earliest signs of insulin resistance pending. And a lot of people don't even ever get that recognized. And so they then end up 10 years down the road and all of a sudden they have pre-diabetes and they're like, it came out of nowhere. I'm like, oh, hell no, it did not. It did not come out of nowhere. It's been building behind the scenes for quite some time now as your body has gone through the spectrum of blood sugar imbalances and insulin resistance changes. It just was never caught. And so now all of a sudden you're slapped with this pre-diabetic or insulin resistance diagnosis when it's probably been building for quite some time. So I want to educate you guys to be able to discern and feel more confident of where are you at on this spectrum? What are different blood sugar imbalance signs and symptoms that you might be exhibiting? What do your labs look like on a regular basis so that you can be more proactive and preventative about blood sugar imbalances? And like I said, knowing that this is the foundation of your hormone hierarchy. If this is off, you will have thyroid issues. You will have gut issues. You will have liver detox issues. You will end up with worsening sex hormone balances. It's like it all affects up the chain. So we just have to make sure that we're managing this end first too. Even if we are diving into some other things like hormone replacement therapy or other supplemental strategies and things like that, which can all be helpful, we need to make sure that we're layering those into a healthy and solid foundation first. So when I talk about this insulin resistance spectrum, there's kind of three clinical definitions of blood sugar imbalances that I like to use in my standard practice to help people kind of understand where am I at on this spectrum, right? So we might be in a place where we have more of this optimal blood sugar picture. We don't have real excessive cravings. Our energy levels are very stable throughout the day. We don't have trouble falling asleep. We don't wake up frequently in the middle of the night. We feel like full and focused between meals. We're not constantly thinking about food. We have an easy time controlling body composition. That's what it feels like to have kind of optimal blood sugar regulation. Slightly deviated from that though is someone that again might run a little bit hyperglycemic, right? Meaning a little bit on the high side. This might manifest itself when we look at things like your fasting glucose on your lab panel being anywhere above 90 on a fasting lab panel. Again, traditional medicine won't say anything until your fasting glucose is like well above 100, but I'm looking for optimal values, right? So I'm always looking, is someone's fasting glucose above 90? Are their triglycerides above 100? Is their hemoglobin A1C trending above about a 5.4, 5.5? Is this individual struggling with elevated insulin levels above like a 5 or a 7? All of those types of things are telling me that there's an early onset of some hyperglycemic issues. And again, this is something that we catch early so that we can implement some strategies now before it becomes a bigger issue later. So step one is kind of that early onset hyperglycemia. Clinical definition number 2 is when someone comes in kind of classic hypoglycemic. They're too low. I would say this is very, very common with someone that has had a lot of experience in different diet strategies, more of the fad diets. So this does tend to be, like I said, a lot of people that are focused on calories in, calories out, people that have either have current disordered eating habits or have had a history of disordered eating habits, someone that tends to do a lot of cardiovascular exercise as a means of like burning off calories. So these people might actually run slightly hypoglycemic. So they might feel some of those traditional things of like cravings, fatigue, even things like headaches, chronic migraines, like I said, gut issues, constipation is a really big one for individuals that tend to run a little bit more hypoglycemic. And this one, like I said, is a little bit harder to diagnose because it doesn't always show up in a traditional blood sugar panel. Someone might feel hypoglycemic at 60 milligrams. Someone might feel hypoglycemic at 70. It's super variable where people actually feel symptomatic of hypoglycemia. And so that's where, again, it's harder if you don't have someone that's trained to ask the right questions and connect the right symptoms of how they feel on a regular basis. It's that secondary part of a clinical picture of blood sugar imbalances that chronically goes missed because individuals are hypoglycemic, they're too low. And to standard medical practice, no one looks for too low, they only look for too high. So if you're not too high, they assume you don't have any blood sugar issues. And I'm like, no, this is the forgotten group of dealing with blood sugar lows. Then we have clinical picture number 3, which gets a little bit more interesting. And it is something that's called reactive hypoglycemia. Reactive hypoglycemia are individuals that deal with both. They deal with high highs, and those high highs then overreact and crash them to low lows. So reactive hypoglycemia, again, a little bit more difficult to catch on labs, but these individuals can also have elevated fasting blood sugar. They can also have elevated fasting insulin levels. They usually have higher cholesterol levels too, just as a source of stress. But these individuals, like I said, are usually very symptomatic. They have a lot of cravings, a lot of fatigue. They'll actually have like to the point where they need to eat something now. They get hangry. They have to eat every couple hours to keep their blood sugar up. And they will be, kind of that classic picture of highs and lows and highs and lows and really riding that blood sugar roller coaster. So ironically, this reactive hypoglycemia is pretty much one step before clinical diabetes. So this is one where, again, it goes missed because if you look at someone's like a traditional value that we look at on a classic lab marker is like a hemoglobin A1C or your HbA1c. HbA1c is an average of your blood sugar markers over about a 3-month span. So what we do with an HbA1c is we average the highest highs and the lowest lows, and we average them out. So do you think that someone that's dealing with reactive hypoglycemia is going to look pre-diabetic on a traditional lab panel where we look at their averages? No, they're not. On a traditional lab panel, they're going to be like, blood sugars are great. See you next year. And they're like, but I feel like garbage, right? And that's because we can't just take something like an average at face value when this person gets sky high and they get low, low. If we average those two numbers out, they look great, but they don't feel great. So a lot of times, like I said, in my clinical practice, I'm looking at labs, but I'm also collecting a lot of symptomology. How are they feeling on a regular basis? What does it feel like between meals for them? Do they feel full and satiated between meals? Do they feel like they have to snack frequently throughout the day? Do they feel like they fall asleep and stay asleep well throughout the night? A lot of times blood sugar imbalances show up in the nocturnal, so they wake frequently and they don't know why. individuals with a lot of sugar cravings, salt cravings, energy crashes throughout the day, people that rely a lot on caffeine for energy. All of these can be, like I said, things that we correlate together along with lab panels to really identify where is somebody at on that insulin resistance spectrum. I don't want to just categorize if someone isn't diagnosably pre-diabetic or type 2 diabetic that they have a healthy blood sugar balance. Oh, no. Like there's so much gray area in the middle of people trending that direction. And that's where I love to come in and really help people catch and identify some things earlier than they've been able to kind of find through more of a traditional or functional medicine approach, and giving them the tools to start to learn, how do I eat in a way that balances my blood sugar? It's not about quantity. It's not about quality. It's not even so much about what you eat, but more about when am I eating? What are my fueling windows? What is my meal timing? What is my meal composition? What are my meal pairings, right? So it goes way more than just a quality or a quantity conversation, which honestly is failing everybody in diet culture. Those things don't matter until blood sugar is satisfied first. So just know that, like I said, this insulin resistance exists on a spectrum. And it doesn't just mean that if you're not diagnosable pre-diabetic or diabetic now, that you might not be on that gray zone trend and be feeling symptomatic of blood sugar imbalances, and those blood sugar imbalances contributing to more downstream hormonal havoc. So I wanted to give you guys at least those little kind of clinical pearls of things you could kind of go back and look at your own labs and be kind of your own sleuth there as you start to look at, like, is my fasting blood sugar above 90? Is my fasting insulin above 7? Do I have elevated triglycerides above 100? Is my A1C score within range below a 5.5? Do I tend to have signs and symptoms of hypoglycemia throughout the day? And be able to kind of question this old school concept that blood sugar balance conversations are just for diabetics, because promise me that they are for everyone. So if that sounds like you and you want some more information or some really some deep dive, even in a one-on-one setting, feel free to go to the link in my Instagram profile, click there and apply to work with me one-on-one. We can draw some comprehensive labs on you and really kind of take a look at where you're at. Also know that this whole blood sugar conversation and adrenal health in general is going to be month 1 of my upcoming 3-month Revive, Restore, Renew You hormone balance program that's launching in January. So I am super excited. This is my first full-fledged 3-month signature program where I'm just looping everything together of this hormone hierarchy and taking a small group of women through this 3-month intensive hormone balancing journey together, which I'm super pumped about. So if that's something that's of interest to you, pre-sale opens on December 1st, which is already this Thursday, and we're going to launch starting in the new year. So if you want to get in early, get in on some discount codes, be sure to follow me on Instagram and social media so that you can get on the early bird discount list and claim your spot for my Revive, Restore, Renew You hormone balancing program that will launch at the beginning of the new year. So otherwise, keep posted on the lowdown on fitness. Also, our other social media handles at Renew University and at Renew Institute, as we're doing lots of cool stuff around just proactive and preventative health and getting you guys to live your happiest and healthiest lives as we wrap up 2022 and look forward to 2023. So thanks for being here today. Enjoy the rest of your Monday. And if you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out.